The final thing I want to show you is how to do just a little plain charm like this one here, like this little heart charm. So I'm going to do a square for this one just to mix it up, and I'm going to use a texture tile. So you can buy these from any metal clay supplier, or you can find lots of natural textures as well. Textured wallpapers, anything like that are great. Sometimes lace, a leaf, anything like that can be wonderful for getting nice textures. But I'm going to go ahead and use this lovely wavy texture tile. So I'm just going to be quite generous with the oil that I put on there because it's quite a thick texture tile. So I want to make sure that it doesn't get stuck to my clay. And I have already put a little bit more grease on here. I've got plenty on here. I've got some on my fingers. I'm just going to dip my cookie cutter into the oil. Because that is sometimes a struggle to get that out. And off I go. So I've actually got 6 cards thick on each side. I'm going to start with 6 and I'm going to go down to 4. So I'm going to start with 6. So just place my piece on there. And I always try and do myself a favour, you know, if it's got lots of lines and creases, just kind of get them out a little bit. It doesn't need to be perfect, but we do want a nice piece to work from. I'm going to go ahead and roll it out. Then I'm going to go down to 4. So take 2 off each side. Place my texture tile on top. Now make sure it's on top of both cards. I've seen a lot of beginners, they place it sideways and their cards are right out and they forget that the cards are what's going to keep the integrity of the thickness of the piece. So just a little tip there. Roll it forwards. And there you can see I've got a lovely texture. So metal clay takes texture beautifully. It's one of its real strengths. Now I'm going to have a think about the design of the piece. I'm going to go for a diamondy design, even though I've got a square. And I'm just going to find the bit that I like the most and then push down. As always, you guys know this by now, you're pros. We put away the excess clay right away, so that we can work with it. And all of this is from the same 7-gram pack. And I've still got a good chunk. I could still make another couple of charms out of that. So you can actually get a lot from one 7-gram pack. And I'm just going to use the end of my tool again, gently pop it out. That came out nice and easy that time. Playing cards are also great for just maneuvering your pieces around. So you can see I've got this beautiful textured piece, and in silver, when that's shined up, it's going to look gorgeous. So I'm going to go ahead and choose where I want my jump ring. I think I'm going to go up here, put my pilot hole in, and that is ready to go on the hot plate. So all 3 of those pieces are now going to be dried, and then we'll be ready to drill the holes and give them a nice sand before we do our firing. Great, so I've got all the pieces off the hot plate and they are now dry. Something to be aware of at this stage, now that they're dry, is that they're very brittle. So we have to be super careful with them. You don't want to put any weight or pressure onto them. They are quite fragile, but we do want to clean them up. So I've done it with these 2 already, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the name tag. We're going to drill the hole. We're going to just neaten up the edges, and all you need for this is a pin vise drill. So this is a little drill bit. It's 1 millimeter thick, and I use that size because our jump rings, which we're going to put through, the little loops we're going to put through the hole, are normally about 0.8 millimeters thick, sometimes 0.7. So 1 millimeter thick will allow for a little bit of shrinkage, and there'll still be plenty of room to put our jump ring through. I've also got a bit of a sanding pad. So this, again, you can get from any metal clay supplier. It's just like a spongy pad, and it's got some grit on one side. It's a bit like sandpaper, but it's a bit easier to hold and work with. And then if you have it, it's not essential, but a little paintbrush can help to just dust off bits of the dry clay as we go through. So I'll just pop these 2 to the side for a moment and work on this one. So I'm going to start with the drill. So I've got this nice pilot hole here I've already done. I'm going to just place my drill on top of that, and I'm going to hold the piece to support it, but very gently. Everything I'm doing is very gentle, remembering that it's brittle and I don't want to break it. At the top of the drill, I'm just placing my hand gently on the top. You can see there's a little twisty bit here. And the pin vices, they tend to have something like this. So that's just a place for me to place my hand, and I'm just going to twist the drill round. Gently, I'm not pushing down at all. I've just got very gentle pressure. I'm letting the drill do the work, and you'll start to see the clay coming up. That's how you know you're getting through. But yeah, don't push through, and take your time. It might take a minute or two to get through, depending on the thickness of your piece and the sharpness of your drill bit. So just give it time, be patient, and wait till you're all the way through. Okay, it feels like I'm through, so I'm just going to lift it up and check. Almost, yeah, so I can just do that tiny last little bit. And I'll just keep going all the way through, and then I'll also reverse and come out. So I've got a nice hole there. Great, I'm happy with that. So now I can move on to my sanding. So using my sand pad, I'm gonna clean up all these edges. So again, holding my piece super gently in between my finger and thumb. Just gonna go across the edge and just smooth it. And I keep checking it with my finger to make sure I'm happy. This is just to neaten up all of those edges. And because it's quite sharp on the end, you've got to try and imagine it in a metal. You don't want a super sharp end, so I might just very gently curve it. If you're used to doing jewellery making and you've done silversmithing, this is very different because you're working with something that is very gentle at this stage. Once it's fired, in a moment it will turn into that solid silver, and it will be very different. We won't have to be gentle with it anymore, but you don't want, after doing all your hard work to this stage, to break it. If you do break it, it is possible to fix it with a little bit of what's called paste, which is little bits of metal clay mixed with water. Creates like a paste. You can buy paste or you can make your own. But most of the time we just want to really avoid breaking it, because even when we fix it, sometimes you can sort of see it. I also want to make sure that I'm doing the back. So sometimes you get little imperfections in the piece. So I'm going to give it a really nice sand on the back. And this is why it can be quite good to have a little texture on the back, because then if there are little imperfections, you don't see them so much. But it depends on the kind of finish you want for your jewellery. And all these little bits of dust, you can actually collect those because they do have silver particles in them. And if you add just a tiny bit of water to a big chunk of them, you'll make your own paste, which is like the glue. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. It's looking nice. So that is ready for torch firing once I've drilled my hole and also sanded all the edges. Now I'm going to torch fire all 3 pieces. Generally speaking, when you're torch firing, you don't want to do a piece that's any bigger than the old sort of 50p pieces. So because these are very small, I'm going to do them together. If you're new to torch firing, I might recommend you do them one by one. It's a little bit easier to control the heat that way, but once you've got a bit of experience, go ahead and put small pieces of the similar size. You can do them together. So I've got a heat-proof brick, really important that I have at least one of those, and make sure, just in terms of health and safety, that your hair's tied back, that there's nothing flammable around. If you have scarves or anything like that, loose hanging clothing, make sure that that's all tucked away. I'm using a torch, which is often used for jewellery making. It's a little hand torch. I filled it with gas. There's a lot more resources on our website for how to do torch firing and things at home. So do check all the health and safety information. But most of it is common sense. You know, it's a flame, so it's going to be hot. This kind of metal area is going to get very hot. So we don't want to touch that, and we don't want to point it at anything flammable. So we keep it all very contained within this block. I'm going to point in a moment the flame at the pieces, and they're going to go through 4 basic stages. So first, there's normally a bit of smoke, then there's a little bit of fire, Don't be alarmed, it's all quite little because they're small pieces. And then it normally goes a bit dark or sooty, and then it will go white. So I say smoke, fire, black, white is the kind of thing I'm looking for. After that, I'm looking for a peachy glow. When I get to the peachy glow stage, I'm going to hold it there for 3 minutes. So that's why I've got my phone timer at the ready. I'm just going to make sure that that is all set up and good to go as well. And that will be the firing. So I'll talk you through it as we go. So I'm just going to turn the gas on my torch and flick the switch and point it at the pieces. Now, because they're very small, they don't always go through all the stages, but we might see them. So there's some smoke there. I don't know if you can see that, but it's coming off. And then there's the fire. Wonderful. Then they kind of go sooty, black, browny colour, and then there's the white. So now I'm looking for the peachy glow, and we've turned off the lights so that hopefully we can see this. And I do recommend, if you're new to torch firing, to do it in the dark, to turn off your lights, because you'll be able to see the peachy glow much better. So I think we are there. So I'm going to set my timer. For 3 minutes, and off we go. Now it doesn't look that peachy, but we've got quite a lot of lights on. So what I don't want to do, I don't want it to be going orange. If it feels very orange, what it means is it's going to probably be melting very soon. And you'll know if your piece starts melting because it will look shiny suddenly. That's the sign, like, oh, I need to really pull the heat back. So remember, you control the heat, not the other way around. So I'm moving the torch around the pieces to try and keep them in that sort of peachy glow, but without going anywhere near orange. So if they look completely white, then I need to come a bit closer and focus the heat a bit more. And if they're looking super orange, I need to pull back a bit more. So don't be afraid to experiment and kind of learn how to work with the torch and the flame. But I keep moving, and it's important that this is done consistently for 3 minutes. So if you get interrupted at any point, let's say you've done a minute or 2 minutes and you get interrupted, when you start doing it again, you don't start from where you left off. You need to start doing the 3 minutes again. Because what we're doing is we're burning off that clay binder. The water's all been removed beforehand. Really, really important that your pieces are 100% dry. Otherwise, they might do little explosions, like little pops. So if you do start torch firing a piece and it pops, what it means is that the water, it wasn't dry. There was water trapped in there. So as long as you leave it for long enough, and you can also pop your pieces onto a mirror before you do torch firing. And if after you've left them on a mirror for a few seconds and you take it off, there's condensation, what that means is there's still water in the piece. It's not dry yet. If the mirror is bone dry, it's a really good sign that your pieces are ready for torch firing. So that's the little mirror test. And I can see as I'm moving the torch around these pieces, they're starting to shrink slightly. So you'll probably, if you look very closely, you can see them start to almost condense. That's where the binder's burnt off, and those silver particles are now really coming together to form these solid silver pieces. So if it's getting a bit hot, I'm just going to cool off a second and come back. Don't do anything else while you're torch firing. It's really important that you have 100% of your concentration on it, you know. Don't do it when the kids are around or anything like that. Make sure that you are just focused on what you're doing, because we've come this far. We want to make sure that the pieces look really lovely and have a really lovely, strong finish to them. Just talk very briefly about hallmarking while we're waiting. So you may have seen on silver pieces, they're often hallmarked 925. That means to every 1,000 parts, 925 parts are silver. The others are other alloys like zinc and copper. For fine silver, for metal clay, it's actually fine silver, so it can be hallmarked 999, which means to every 1,000 parts, 999 parts are actually silver. So it's even more precious than sterling silver, but you can also get it hallmarked in 925 if you prefer. So now my timer's gone off, I've reached the end, I can turn off my gas on my torch and my pieces are fired. If I want to quench them, I can, but I'm not going to quench the stone one. So quenching is a process whereby I take a very hot piece of metal, so I'm using tweezers, it's super hot, I would never touch this with my hands. Pop it in the water and it's going to instantly cool. So you'll hear a little noise, little fizzle, and immediately it's cold, so I can touch it right away. So I can do that with these two. I can't do that with the one with the stone because I don't want to risk it cracking. Wait for the noise, there we go. And now it's ready. So I'm just going to leave the other one to dry naturally. Don't worry if it's the stone colour has changed. If it's a heat-proof stone, it will just very gradually over the next couple of minutes come back to the correct colour. So I'm just going to take it off the heat and just leave it over there to cool. The next stage we can start polishing up. So I'm going to take one of my pieces and a brass bristle brush, and I'm just going to rub it. So you can add a bit of water as well to the brush if you like, and give it a good rub. And this is where we start to really see that transformation. The metal clay changes from a white to looking a little bit like a silver piece of jewellery. And actually, if I tap it on the table, you'll see it's starting to sound like metal now, because it is. It's a piece of solid silver. So it's no longer fragile. I don't have to be careful with it anymore. It's a solid metal. So it's always an amazing moment, this, I think, when you kind of start to really see it come to life. And so I'm going to brass brush all of them. And then the next stage I can move on to is my polishing. So if you have a polishing motor or a rotary tumbler, or if you're used to polishing silver jewelry, you can polish it in any way which feels comfortable to you. But I am going to show you a very simple way to do hand polishing at home next.